You work hard and save up to buy a camera, and you didn't think about it before but realize you need to spend extra for memory cards, batteries, chargers, bags, and a tripod. Gotta have a tripod at least. And then someone asks you, which lens are you going to get? Lens? What lens? Doesn't that just come with the camera? Then you Google and look up all the lenses that will fit your camera and realize these lenses cost even more than everything I just talked about. I want to give you an introduction to vintage lenses on modern cameras in this video. In future parts of the series, I will talk about some cheap vintage lenses that are good to start with, and also things to be really careful of when buying vintage lenses. If you want to start using old lenses or learn more about them, make sure to subscribe. Modern photography lenses are intricate, sophisticated pieces of hardware. They are the result of decades of technological development. This is why good lenses are generally quite expensive, but at its very core, lenses are literally still just lenses. Pieces of glass shaped and coated to focus light. A lot of the modern technology like microchips and motors inside a lens has to do with the automatic control features like autofocus and aperture control. For video shooting, these features are not as desirable as in photography. Even with today's amazing video autofocus, I find myself pulling focus manually half the time. This is why vintage lenses are an attractive alternative for video shooters. First of all, vintage lenses are cheaper than similar new lenses. Unfortunately, they are not as cheap as they used to be. More and more people have realized the value of old glass, which drove the prices up. And on top of that, some vintage lenses are actually really expensive because they are rare, but usually they are a cheaper alternative. This means if you're a budding cameraman, vintage lenses are a great option to get your hands on some glass without spending as much as you would have if you bought new ones. I suggest looking at your local websites for the ones you want, then have a look on eBay if you can't find any locally. Sometimes if you get lucky, your local photography store might have some good ones in their cabinet. Or if you're really lucky, you could even find some in a random garage sale or someone's attic. There is a misconception that vintage lenses are usually too soft and has too many artifacts. While this may be true for some very old or very cheap lenses, this doesn't really apply to vintage lenses that are good quality. Of course, with modern coating and glass treatment, there is a clear difference in sharpness between modern and vintage. But in my opinion, most people can't tell the difference by looking at the sharpness alone, unless you're pixel peeping. The biggest telling difference is the flaring. Older lenses tend to flare more easily and more prominently. Sharpness and image quality is in some ways subjective. While lens choice always depends on the project, I personally usually prefer the more unique look of vintage lenses than the clinical image of modern ones. Decades of lens making history in different countries and companies mean there are a lot of different lens mounting systems. Lenses are generally made to fit certain camera systems, which also means they have different flange distances, which is why you need adapters to be able to use vintage lenses on modern cameras. Thankfully, almost all kinds of adapters are available online these days. Simple lens adapters are generally on the cheaper side. There are even adapters for medium format lenses. Before purchasing an adapter, you need to know exactly what mount you are adapting to and from. And because the build quality can somewhat vary, it is smarter to buy and test an adapter before buying many of the same one. The build quality of vintage lenses are in some ways superior to modern lenses. Older lenses were generally made with metal instead of plastic. They are linear focus with hard stops and have lens markings on them. Manual focus is still the more dominant focus method in the video and film world. This is why vintage lenses are perfect for video. They are also good candidates for modifications for cinematic use, like adding a focus gear, standardizing the filter rings, and declicking aperture. Lots of people who work as cinematographers own a set of vintage photography lenses which have been modded for filmmaking. All photography and videography gear requires some research before buying, but as you might have guessed already, vintage lenses require a bit of extra effort. There is a whole history of lenses from different eras, different countries, brands and systems. Other than the obvious focal length and the mounting system, there are things to consider for your image, such as the lens coating, distortion, sharpness, flaring, bokeh, and lens design. Doing some study in this area and figuring out which lenses you want to try out will take a bit of time, but doing this will help you in the long term, as you will learn a lot about lenses and cameras and how it relates to photography and filmmaking. A blog called Vintage Lenses for Video has a lot of articles you can get inspirations from. Hopefully this gave you a good overview about vintage photography lenses and how it can be used on modern cameras. Click that notification icon and subscribe for more videos in this vintage lens series.